The Silent Caller, Episode 1. The First Call. It started, as so many tragedies do, with a phone call. At 2:03 a.m. on a Tuesday night, the Emergency Dispatch Center in Fairview City received a 911 call. The line opened, the operator gave her standard greeting, but there was no voice on the other end. Instead, there was only silence. A faint hiss of static, the shallow sound of breathing, and then nothing. The dispatcher repeated her words, louder this time, her voice carrying a trace of urgency. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" No response. After 35 seconds, the call ended. By itself, it seemed like one of the many accidental dials dispatchers receive every night. But what came next would change that assumption forever. Just 20 minutes later, officers were sent to a quiet apartment complex on the east side of the city. A neighbor had reported strange noises, a heavy thud against a wall. When police arrived, they found the door to apartment 3B slightly ajar. Inside was the lifeless body of 24-year-old Rachel Monroe. Rachel was a student, just months away from completing her degree in nursing. Friends described her as bright, hardworking, and always willing to help. There was no sign of forced entry, no ransacked drawers, no robbery. But there was her phone, lying face up on the kitchen counter. Its call history displayed the last number dialed, 911, at 2:03 a.m., the same time dispatchers had heard the silent call. The detectives assigned to the case couldn't ignore the connection. Had Rachel dialed in desperation, unable to speak? Was she trying to signal for help? The medical examiner determined the cause of death. Strangulation. No defensive wounds. No signs of a prolonged struggle, which meant Rachel likely knew her killer or had been caught completely off guard. The lack of evidence was chilling. The apartment was spotless. Whoever had done this left nothing behind. All the investigators had to go on was that eerie 911 recording. When they played it back, they strained to hear anything useful. For the first few seconds, there was silence. Then, faintly, the sound of breathing, shallow, uneven, terrified. At the 20-second mark, a soft scrape, like a chair leg dragging across the floor. And then, just before the line disconnected, a muffled sound that could have been a whisper. Too faint to be certain. The case file labeled it simply, unintelligible noise. But for the dispatchers who worked that night, it was unforgettable. One later recalled, "I knew, in my gut, that I was listening to someone's last moments. That silence was louder than any scream." News of Rachel's death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Candlelight vigils were held, friends and classmates left flowers outside her apartment, and social media filled with questions. Who could have wanted her dead? Why was there no sign of forced entry? And above all, what really happened during that call? Police kept their theories close. Some suspected a stalker. Others believed it was a crime of passion. Maybe someone Rachel had been dating in secret. Her family denied she had enemies. But in the quiet halls of the precinct, a darker idea began to take shape. What if Rachel wasn't the only target? 2 weeks later, a second call came in. This time at 11:41 p.m. The dispatcher answered, and again, silence. Faint breathing, then the line cut. An hour later, police found 31-year-old Daniel Hughes in his home.
Dead.
Strangled. Once again, his phone had dialed 911 minutes before. Once again, there was no forced entry. Once again, the call contained nothing but silence. Detectives realized this was no accident. No random coincidence. Someone was forcing victims to make a call before killing them. And with that realization, a name began to circulate in hushed tones inside the department. The Silent Caller. But back when Rachel Monroe was found, investigators didn't have that picture yet. They only had fragments, a quiet apartment, a phone that had dialed for help, and a dead young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Detective Alan Pierce, one of the first on scene, would later say in an interview, "I remember standing in that kitchen, looking at the phone. It was like the room was still holding its breath, like the walls knew what happened, but they weren't talking. The public, of course, demanded answers. Rumors swirled online. Some said Rachel had been stalked by a stranger she met at her nursing rotation. Others insisted it was a jealous ex. A few even leaned into the sensational, whispering about urban legends, a phantom killer who called before striking. But investigators kept circling back to the same disturbing fact. If Rachel had placed that call herself, why hadn't she spoken? Why hadn't she screamed for help? There were only two possibilities. Either she had been silenced before she could, or someone else had made the call. Someone who wanted the police to hear only silence. In time, Rachel's case would be remembered not just as a tragedy, but as the beginning of a pattern. The first breadcrumb in a trail of terror that would stretch across months, leaving more bodies, more unanswered calls, and more questions than anyone could stand. But on that night, in that quiet apartment with the faint smell of lilies on the counter and textbooks stacked neatly on the desk, Rachel was the first. The first voice never heard. The first call never answered. The first victim of a silent caller. And for investigators, it was only the beginning. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like the video, share it with friends who love true crime, and subscribe for more terrifying cases like the silent caller. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss episode 2. Let me know in the comments, what do you think the silence on that 911 call really meant?